Good morning and welcome to another Wine Steward video. Thank you for continuing to watch these and continuing to participate at the Wine Steward. And behold, a glass with not quite enough wine in it. Let us augment, supplement, pour in some more. Can you tell with this lighting that this is a red that's not black or purple in color, but a little more ruby hued? At least it was being called ruby by the diligent students out at Las Positas College last night when we had our penultimate class. You know what that means, right? Second to the last class at Las Positas College last night, whereas we've already heavily covered France with 4 weeks of curriculum, and Italy with 3 or 4, and Spain and Portugal and Germany all got their, pretty darn good coverage. And last night was about everything else. In other words, when you're teaching a Wines of the Old World class, you attempt to show as much as you can of the old world. Well, you can't, right? So you try, you make feeble attempts. And so what we did, in fact, was pour 4 different wines last night. Pour and talk about, by the way. This is teaching, this is learning. We poured and talked about 4 different wines from 4 different old world wine locations, including this wine right here. Let's get the bottle up in front of you. And let me note, and I'm going to be talking about this, I think, week after week, because we're dealing with it week after week. Let me note that this wine is hopefully what helps the wine steward and the wine industry in general make it. Because as you've probably been reading in the news and hearing on the radio, various reports are coming in right now that wine business is down locally and generally, internationally. And that has very much to do with a distracted younger generation that isn't necessarily following, getting into wine the same way their parents did when they were young. The message is different, the distractions are different. That damn hard seltzer they're drinking is a big distraction right there. And all of a sudden alcohol is often taught to be, they're being taught that it's poison and you should avoid alcohol at all costs, and so on and so forth. And we, older and wiser, know that it's all about moderation and eating with your great wine, and also the beauty of wine that cannot be replicated by a hard seltzer or even a whiskey or a beer. I mean, they try. They speak a lot to what grains were used and where they were grown, and they say, yes, like wine, this whiskey has a sense of terroir. Nowhere near like wine, but let's talk about what kind of wine has a sense of terroir. Terroir meaning a sense of place, location. What kind of wine does that? Certainly not everything, and in fact, not much of what you see at a grocery store down the street. Those wines are so made in a winery to accommodate your palate in search of safety that they've erased everything about source, the idea of where it came from. And what culture is behind that particular wine is gone. I really believe that, and I'm going to be trumpeting this until I fall over dead, that the thing that will save the wine industry is getting back to honestly good wine that speaks of its source, its geographical source, its terroir. Terroir is defined typically as the combination of climate and soil and topography. Climate meaning what's the weather like. Of course, soil, the soil type certainly has a lot to say about what the wine ends up being. And finally, topography, that has to do with, is it hilly or is it grown on flat area, and which way, if it's hilly, is that hill facing? What is the vineyard seeing morning sun or evening sun or afternoon sun, and so on. And so all of those things factor in. I add to that and believe wholeheartedly that there's a 4th element of terroir, which is the local culture. The way the people there, somewhere in the south of France, somewhere in Tuscany, Italy, somewhere in Greece, the way people there are used to making their wine, what they prefer to make based on what they eat. And so you've got these elements of honesty factored into truly great and honest, soulful wine that does not happen in so many of the wines that especially young people reach for. They are just like, they're getting fruit-forward, almost candied wines that simply, they're not stimulating. I mean, maybe they're delicious, but they are not intellectually stimulating and easily forgotten. And I do believe that what we do here at the Wine Steward has much more to do with wines of source and it's kind of like getting to go on a trip somewhere through a bottle of wine. When you can't afford that plane ticket or your schedule doesn't permit you to go to Europe or some other wine place, you know, it's kind of like going there. What do we have here? This is this wine that I think I've taught you how to pronounce before, but let's do it again. This is not Xinomavro. Even all of my wine vendors call it Xinomavro. It's Xinomavro. Xinomavro. Different emphasis and a different sound at the beginning. Not the Z sound, but kind of a KS. Xinomavro. Say it after me. Whatever. We don't care if you mispronounce. I do care that you get to know this wine, which is the most important varietal of Greece. This is grown in Macedonia, Greece. Naousa is a subregion, and it is compared to, and this is important because when we don't know a wine, it's important to like the comfort of connecting it to another wine in the world. It is compared to Nebbiolo from Piemonte, Italy, and you can see that I've poured it in a glass appropriate for Nebbiolo, and Xinomavro certainly works well in it too. This, as I mentioned before, is not dark in color, and therefore it also resembles Nebbiolo in its appearance, but it really calls out the Nebbiolo thing with its perfumey, potpourri, cherry and cut citrus and earth. There's tree bark, there's forest. There is so much in this nose, in this rather affordable, younger vine, Xinomavro from northern Greece. And then we taste it. More importantly, feel this wine. Structure, tannin, yeah, a little bit like Nebbiolo, but definitely its own thing. We want wine to have strong identities, and we want those identities, at least I do, to have a lot to do with where the wine came from and who the hell made it and what those people eat. Well, we know the Greeks are lamb lovers, and this is in fact fantastic with lamb. You kind of need lamb to resolve the tannins, but there's enough fruit going on here. This wine got opened yesterday. It's been hanging out on my desk, gathering a little bit more air. It's much more accommodating today, but even upon pulling that cork yesterday, this wine was what I call thoughtfully delicious, distinctively delicious. Xinomavro, get in on it. And I want to elaborate on this point and say that what we also showed the class last night was something nearly I think nobody in that class had ever had a dry ferment, F-U-R-M-I-N-T, which is the primary grape of the Tokai region of northeastern Hungary. Yes, now we're going to Hungary for a white wine. I'm not going to try it right now, but I will say that this wine is racy, and many of you, if you've heard of Tokai, know it only as a dessert wine. They were making botrytized noble rot dessert wine more than 200 years before Sauternes, Bordeaux, France was doing it. In fact, Hungary, as little known as it is to us historically, informed Germany on how to make botrytis noble rot wines, sweet wines, and then the idea got to Bordeaux. So Hungary was actually the teacher of this idea that we don't relate with Hungary necessarily. But this is not sweet. It uses the exact same grape, but it is a bone dry ferment, 100% ferment from Hungary. It is racy in acidity. You can actually age this white wine. When I tasted this with its producer, I also got to taste 7 or 8 year old versions of dry white wine. Exact same grape, single vineyards. They were glorious. I wish I could carry them all. But this is training wheels. This is a starter for you that's fairly affordable and does take you to a place for a grape maybe you've never heard of and certainly have never had in dry form. Well, maybe you have. We've carried 1 or 2 before. But anyway, ferment. Very nice stuff. Racy, racy, racy. Have it with raw oysters. It'll work with that. You need some food with that wine. Now, what we also showed the class last night, we went back to the origin of wine, you could say. The origin of wine is the wines of perhaps Armenia or Georgia or somewhere back there. Azerbaijan, that is thought to be the cradle, the original cradle of wine. They've been making wine in Georgia, the country, for 8,000 years or more. Now, I heard on the radio today that perhaps we have found evidence that China has us beat there, or has them beat there, and has been making wine for even longer, but that's not resolved yet. We have been saying traditionally that either in Armenia, Turkey, or somewhere near where Noah's Ark landed and Noah jumped out of the boat and planted a vineyard, that's in the Bible, that's where winemaking, intentional winemaking started. You know, unintentional winemaking was certainly an accident where somebody had grape juice lying around and all of a sudden it fermented and somebody drank it and thought that tastes funny, but I feel better. So that's how wine started, no doubt. And then people started to do it intentionally, probably here. This is a wine type called amber wine. It's made with white grapes, but it is treated like red wine. It ferments on the skins and stays with the skins for a while, up to at least a month for this particular wine, made with Arquetzateli and Masvana, something like that. It's half and half of each of those grapes that are very unfamiliar to us, but they're actually the most important white grapes of Georgia. What's the most important red grape of Georgia? This. I've brought them both in. Only showed one last night. It's all we had time for, but this is on the wine bar, ladies and gentlemen. This is called Saperavi. It's made with the grape Saperavi, the most important red grape of Georgia. Now you know. Amber wine, a white wine made like red wine in that it fermented and aged on the skins, and then Saperavi for you to check out. Again, a visit to a wine place I may never get to go to, literally. I get to go there through that really cool bottle of wine. I mean, that's what we want. We want distinctiveness. I don't want sameness. Do you? I mean, people who join our wine clubs, they're saying, give me difference. I've got one winery's worth of wine piling up in my cellar. I am ready to get 2 bottles every month that come from anywhere but the winery to which I belong. And give me difference, take me all over the place. Here's another wine with difference. I'm not going to elaborate on it. I'm just going to say there's nothing like Chilean Carmenere. Whether or not you like Chilean Carmenere, that's up to you. But you've got to agree that Carmenere from Chile is really its own thing. And this happens to be a really good one. This is on the Wine Bar Flight, by the way. I know I'm rambling, but I think you get my point. I'd like to talk more about what is necessary, in my opinion, for the wine industry these days. Now, let's jump a little bit out of wine and mention the fact that, let's stay with wine. The new vintage of Mirabeau X is here. This is one of our absolute favorite dry rosés. It comes from Provence. How does it express terroir? Well, there's a lot of sunshine in Provence. There's a particular choice of grapes to grow very well there. And you've got Grenache and Cinsault happening in this wine, along with some Cabernet, believe it or not. And also a local attitude of, what goes well with a salade niçoise? Let's have rosé this way. And in fact, what also gets established after a while is Provence gets to be known and famous for a certain style of rosé. Why would they screw with that? Why would they change their product for which they are famous? I mean, that's like screwing with your brand and ruining your own business. So this dry rosé is certainly an expression of location, but also a certain expression of good business sense and cultural preference. Salade niçoise, ever had one? Have one on this warm day coming up, out on your back patio with a glass of Mirabeau X. And this is a segue, just to say that we do have this once again. This Mirabeau, says Mirabeau. Well, is that wine? No, this is a pink, very dry gin made by the same folks. How cool that a dry rosé winemaker is also making a very pretty gin, Mirabeau. Kind of irresistible bottle, too. Very nice. One final note, and we'll let you go, is that Michter's is back in our collectible room where we have a lot of very nice spirits. And Michter's is known to whiskey lovers. This bourbon is certainly followed from what we've noticed. Some of the wine and spirits vendors have had to coach me a little bit on the spirits thing, but they said you should carry Michter's because a lot of people who like the good stuff, they follow this. And we were told if we bought enough of this, they're entry level, so-called. It's not inexpensive, but it's fantastic at its decent price. When we buy enough of this, we occasionally get the opportunity to buy a few bottles of their high end. So they have different, more limited releases. So this is a more expensive and more special rye from Michter's, of which we were only able to buy 3 bottles, but we were enabled by selling the base product as well. So just come on in, you whiskey and bourbon lovers, and I'm a big fan of rye myself. Not everybody's a rye person, but I think rye is a little more interesting than good old bourbon, but it's up to you. Have I said everything? Have I covered everything that's on the table in front of me that you cannot see? Is there anything back there I should further describe? No, that's it. I want to just say thank you. Thank you for being good wine wanderers, and keep wondering and keep believing in the idea of honest wine coming from saying something of its source. That's what I think we got to get back to. That original idea is the most interesting thing and delicious and hopefully ultimately good for business thing about wine. So believe it with me. Come on in and show your faith up here at the Wine Bar Mezzanine down there on the floor. We'll see you soon. Thank you.